Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sara Tariq and I'm an assistant professor in ComSat's Institute of Information Technology, Department of Management Sciences. I've done my MBA from Bahria Institute of Management Sciences and Computer Sciences in the year 2000. I joined ComSats in December 2000, worked as a business analyst in the institute for about 2 years, and then I joined the Department of Management Sciences as a lecturer. Ever since, I've been working in the department and teaching courses related to management, marketing, and business. That's a little brief background introduction about myself. The course that I'm going to teach is called Introduction to Business, MGT100, MGT100, and it's a simple enough course. I can't say it's a difficult course because it's not really difficult. The purpose of this course is to give our students a general background of what business is all about. What generally happens is that when we take up a business degree, we're coming from various different backgrounds. For example, some of us have done pre-engineering, then there are others who've done pre-medical, and then there are some of us who've done commerce as well. Hence, we all are coming from different backgrounds and we have different knowledge bases. Now, to bring all of you to a particular level whereby we can start your business degree and whereby all of you have the same knowledge base, that's the basic purpose of Introduction to Business, MGT100. Now, as far as the lecture is concerned, our very first lecture with you people, it's just going to be an introductory lecture whereby we're going to give you a brief introduction of the entire course. Now, first up, we're going to talk about the course objectives as to what's the purpose of studying the course and what do we expect. What do we expect of our students once they have done the course? What do we expect our students to learn? Now, the first and the basic primary course objective of Introduction to Business is to provide our students with theoretical background regarding basic business concepts, so that once you take up specialized courses in later semesters, something like management, something like marketing, something like finance, or something like accounting, you will know what the teacher is talking about. You are not blank. You are aware of various concepts that the teacher is saying. The second purpose of this course is basically that yes, we're going to teach you the concepts, but we're also going to give you practical examples so that you can apply the concepts to practical life, to practical situations, to practical examples, to real life situations. Now, the third objective of this course is, yes, through the camera, we provide you a classroom environment so that your learning becomes enhanced and so that you can learn in a better environment. Now, just to give you a brief description about what the course will be all about, or what will we be teaching you in Introduction to Business in the next, let's say, 30 lectures. First up, we're going to tell you what business is, what actually is the business environment. When I say business, what do I mean by it? So first up, we're going to define what business is. Then, since every business operates or does business in a particular environment, we're going to study in depth, in detail, various business environments and their impact on an organization, corporation, and an enterprise. Next up, we're going to talk about how to conduct your business ethically and how to be socially responsible. Then we're going to talk about entrepreneurship, the skills, the behaviors needed to be a successful entrepreneur and to start a new venture. Then we're going to go into the management portion of the course, whereby we're going to talk about management, we're going to talk about planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. And we're going to talk about how to plan for your business, how to organize your resources for the business. When I say resources, I basically mean all sorts of resources, be it human, be it physical, be it financial. How do you manage all your resources? Then we're going to talk about leading as to how, once you have a large workforce, how will you lead those workforce? How will you motivate those people? How will you see that the work that is assigned to them, they do that work and do it responsibly and do it effectively. Then finally, we're going to go into controlling to see that did we achieve what we targeted or did we achieve what we planned. Once we're done with that, we'll move into the marketing portion of the course. The marketing portion will give you a brief background of what marketing is, meaning that we're going to talk about we're going to define what marketing is. We're going to tell you what is the differentiation between goods and services. When I say product, what do I mean by that? We're going to talk about consumer behavior, how to analyze your consumers and customers, how to know what they need and want, and then develop products and services, goods and services according to the needs and wants of the customers. Since we're going to talk about marketing, we're going to go and discuss things concerning pricing. We're going to talk about how to distribute your product and make it available for your customers through a particular territory. And we're going to talk about how to promote your product, how to advertise your product, and how to make sure that your consumers and your customers are aware of the products and services, or the goods and services that you're offering to them. Once we're done with that, we're going to come to the last portion of our course, which is about accounting and finance. We're going to do very basic concepts of accounting. We're going to say, okay, what accounting is, what is balance sheet, what is statement of cash flow, what is an income statement. We're going to talk about finance, a little bit about finance as well. We'll talk about short-term expenditures, long-term expenditures, where do we get our funds from. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of investing personally. We're going to talk about if you can get loans, why should you get loans, should you get loans, and stuff like that. Now, I've just given you a brief background, these 13 points. They're very, very briefly to describe my course. One shouldn't really get worried. It's not a rocket science course. It's not maths. It's not statistics. It's a very simple course. The purpose of this course is not to make you experts in all these fields. The purpose is so that you should have a general understanding of what business is. So when you go ahead into later semesters, if somebody says, okay, what business is, you should be able to define it. If somebody asks you, what is profit, you should be able to tell you what profit is. If somebody tells you, okay, tell me the difference between marketing and sales, you should have it in your mind, the difference between marketing and sales. If somebody tells you or asks you what strategic planning is, or uses this term in some lecture discussion, you should be able to know what strategic planning is. So that's the basic primary purpose of this course. Nothing to really worry about. Simple enough course in that sense. Just to give you a brief view of how we will do the marking in this course. This course has 100 marks. Now, we've distributed these 100 marks into various categories. We're going to give you 4 assignments, and those 4 assignments will be allocated 15 marks. We're also going to take 4 quizzes, and those 4 quizzes will have 10 marks. Now, assignment and quizzes makes up 25% of your entire course grade. The rest is sessional 1 exam, which is 10% of your grade, and sessional 2 exam, which is 15% of your grade. Now, sessional 1 and sessional 2 will be conducted on the days, dates, and months that will be announced by the university. Now, the assignment, the quizzes, the sessional 1 and the sessional 2 makes up 50% of your grade. Now, the rest 50% is your terminal examination or your final examination, which is going to have 50% marks. That is the total 100% grade that this Introduction to Business, or ITB as we all call it, course has. Now, the general passing marks, or the passing marks actually, is 50%. So you need to have 50 to pass this particular course. Now, the textbook that I've chosen is Business Essentials. It's an 8th edition book, which is written by Ricky W. Griffin and Ronald J. Ebert, and it's a publisher's Prentice Hall. Now, this book should be easily available in the market for you guys, so you should have this book. You will be having the slides for this particular course as well. As we proceed, as we go along, you will be looking at the slides as well. But please be very clear in your mind that slides are slides and books are books. And that too, I as an instructor do not and will not replace a book. My purpose of just sitting here and is to explain to you or elaborate to you the points, the concepts, the things that is there in the book. So please, 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 it is extremely essential, extremely important, imperative for you to get this book. The purpose, I've literally assigned this book purposefully because this book is easily available anywhere. Now, the reference text that I've recommended is Business Today, Stephen P. Robbins, Harcourt College Publishers. This is again a very good book, and it should be a very good supplement for your textbook as well. So as a teacher, as an instructor, I would assume, hope and wish that all of you get the textbook in addition to the slides and the CDs and the course material that you get, because what I'm going to do is explain to you the concepts. What these books will have is actually, it's going to give you the concept and explain to you those concepts with examples coming from America or Europe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you the concepts, and I will try to give you examples from Pakistan, from our country, from our market, from our perspective, so that you can understand it better, so that you can relate to those examples better. So again, at the end, I would want each one of you to get the textbook, and if you can get the reference text as well, it would be very, very good. But if you can't, the textbook is essential, it's compulsory for you to have. I think that's about it for the introduction of myself and the course as well. Let's just start with the course, with the very first chapter of the book, which is Understanding Business Systems. Now, what will we be doing in this particular chapter? 4, 5, 6 simple things. First up, we're going to define what business is. We're going to define why people do business, or why people form corporations or form enterprises, and what are the basic functions of these particular businesses, organizations, enterprises. Then, since we're doing business, we're going to study the history of business as to how business organizations as we see today in 2012, how have they evolved over the years. We have to see the history of these businesses and enterprises. Then we're going to talk about different types of economic systems, global economic systems. Moving on, we're going to study demand and supply. We're going to talk about demand curve and supply curve and their impact on business organizations and enterprises. And finally, we're going to discuss the private enterprise, and we're going to discuss what is competition and what are the various different types and forms of competition. So the very first thing that we're going to talk about today is we're going to define what business is. Now, a business is basically an organization that provides goods and services that are to be sold for a profit. Now, if you would look at this particular definition of business, there are 3 basic things that you need to be concerned about. First up, a business would always be an exchange activity. Second up, a business will always involve goods and services. And third up, it has to be sold for profit. Now let us go through these 3 simple things in the definition of business. First up, an exchange process. Do you know what an exchange process is? An exchange process is basically a transaction. Now the question arises, can you do a transaction only? Or if you're the only one there, can you get involved in the transaction? No, you can't, right? So for any transaction or for any exchange activity to take place, you would need 2 different people. Now, in a business, these 2 people are called buyers and sellers. Now, sellers are those people who sell their products, goods and services for some money, or offer their goods and services to other people so that they can buy them. On the other hand, buyers are those people who have certain needs and wants, and they would like their needs and wants to be satisfied by a particular good and service, and they're willing to pay for that goods and service. So coming back to our previous discussion of what an exchange process is, an exchange process, or a transaction that we call it, would always occur between a buyer and a seller. That's part 1 of the definition of business. The second definition of business is that it has to be goods and services. Now you need to be very, very clear about your distinction between goods and services. Now, goods are tangible things, right? For example, this pen that I have, it would be a good. The computer that you use, it's going to be a good. The television that you have is a good. The candy that you eat is a good. The air conditioner that you use is a good. The fan in your house is a good. So a good is something tangible. Now the question is, what is tangibility, or what is tangible? Tangible is anything that you can touch, hold, see in front of you, right? So something that you can hold is something which is tangible. On the other hand, what's a service? A service is something intangible. Now, what do I mean by intangibility? Yes, it's the opposite of tangibility. Intangibility is when you can't hold something, right? Something, yes, it might be right in front of you, yes, but you will not be able to hold it in your hand. For example, when you go to a barber shop to get a haircut, right? Now, can you see the haircut? Yes, you can see it at the end, but the barber is providing you the service of cutting your hair. Can you see that? Can you hold that? No, you cannot hold that in your hand. Similarly, when you go to a hospital, hospitals are also providing you with service. Now, service is something which you cannot hold. So that's the distinction between goods and services. Now, the third thing that is there in the definition of business is something called as profit, for which all businesses exist actually. Now, what is profit? Profit is, simply speaking, from a bookish perspective, profit is basically the difference between your revenues and your expenses. Now, you can ask me, what are revenues and what are expenses? Revenues is all that you earn from your business, meaning all the money that you get from your business by selling of your goods and services. And what are expenses? Expenses are the cost that you've incurred to make your goods and services. For example, the cost that you incur would be the cost of raw material. That could be one cost. Maybe bringing your raw material from Sheikhupura to Islamabad would be another cost. Now, once you're calculating profits, what you do is that you deduct your expenses from your revenues so that you come up with a figure. Now, if that particular figure is positive, it is called a profit. And if that particular figure, revenue minus expenses figure, is negative, it's called a loss. Now, these are the three basic ideas or the three basic concepts within the definition of business. So let me just go through the definition again. Now, a business is basically a transaction or an exchange process that occurs between buyers and sellers so that they can exchange their goods and services so that to earn their profit. So what I've done is I've just elaborated a bit of the definition that is there in the slides so that you can see, and that is a comprehensive definition of what business is about. Now, business is another perspective. If you want to look at profit, another perspective of profit is that it's basically the reward that the owner gets for assuming or taking the risk. Now, business in itself is risky, meaning when I start a business, it's not necessary that I get a profit. I can go into a loss as well. Knowing or realizing fully well, I still want to do business, or I still undertake that risk to start my business. Now, profit is basically a reward for that particular thing, for that particular risk that I'm taking. So that's a comprehensive definition of business that I've just given to you. Now, the other thing that a business is going to involve is that we're going to have buyers and sellers, right? And buyers can also be called consumers. Now, consumers are going to have their own choices, and they're going to demand the things and the products and the services that they would need. Now, a business or an enterprise or an organization or a business in general is going to have whereby the consumers have the freedom to choose how to satisfy their wants and needs, meaning as a consumer or as a customer, you can choose whatever you like. You can buy whatever you like. So if I have a ballpoint of 3 different brands in front of you, you can choose any ballpoint that you like or any colored ballpoint that you like according to your needs and wants. So if I'm a teacher, I might need a red ballpoint. So that is my need, right? Or that is my want. So I'm going to choose a ballpoint which has red ink in it. Similarly, if you're the student and you need to attempt a paper, you're going to need a blue ballpoint or a black ballpoint. So you're going to choose whatever you need according to your needs and wants. Similarly, businesses will also have whereby a consumer will have the freedom to decide how to meet those wants and needs. Now, the consumer is going to say that I have this need and this want. Now, the business is going to see what are the needs and wants of the consumers or the customers, and they're going to produce those things which will fulfill the needs and wants of those customers. So that's the second thing that the business, when I say the term business, that's the second thing that it entails within its definition. Finally, success in business requires spotting a promising opportunity and then developing a good plan for capitalizing on it. Meaning, two words which are important in this definition. First up, promising opportunity. A promising opportunity is an opportunity which will give you profit. A promising opportunity is an opportunity where you're sure that if you start this business, or if you take up this opportunity, it's going to be good for you, or it's going to give you money. That's a promising opportunity. And capitalizing on this opportunity is, a lot of time you see a lot of opportunities, but it's not necessary that you undertake all of them. Or it's not necessary that you say, okay, I'm going to pick this one up and I'm going to take this up and I'm going to start thinking about it and I'm going to start doing something about it. So a business will have two things. One, you're going to have to identify a profitable opportunity. Two, you will have to capitalize on it. So let's have a very quick recap about the definition of what business is. First up, business is an exchange activity which is going to involve buyers and sellers, whereby these buyers and sellers will exchange goods and services for a particular profit. Now we define what profit is. Profit is basically the reward that the businessman or the entrepreneur or an individual takes for risking his or her time and money. And finally, in a more bookish way, the definition of a profit is it's basically your revenues minus your expenses. Now, why would we have a business? A business is going to involve a particular opportunity, a profitable opportunity, whereby we need to capitalize on it, start a business, taking that idea and start a business on it. And finally, we're going to have consumers who are going to have their needs and wants, and we're going to have manufacturers who will, after analyzing the needs and wants, will make goods and services so that those needs and wants can be met. Now, why should somebody go into business? First, easiest, simplest reason for business is profit making. That's the reason, the only reason that people, individual organizations have gone for business. That's the reason that people do business, profit making, full stop, nothing else. Now, in addition to profit making, if we go into deeper and dig deeper and analyze further, first up, why people do business is provision of goods and services. You have that feeling that, okay, I'm giving to the community, I'm giving to the society, I'm providing goods and services to people, I'm fulfilling their needs and wants. Second up is employment of workers, because if you're going to start your own business, you're going to have people coming and working for you. Another reason for going for business is that you become independent, in the sense that you are no longer working for somebody else. You are your own boss, which is a great feeling, by the way. A third reason, or third benefit of business is innovation and opportunities. You have lots of innovative ideas in front of you, creative ideas in front of you. You take advantage of those ideas, you take advantage of those opportunities, expand your business, grow your business, and become more profitable or have more profit. Another reason for having your business, or another benefit of business, is that it improves your quality of life and standard of living. Obviously, if you're going to have more profit, if you're going to have your quality of life is going to improve. If you're living in a smaller house, you're going to go into a medium-sized house. You're going to earn more profit. You're going to shift from a medium-sized house to a larger house. Similarly, if you were driving a smaller car, your business is doing very well, you're earning more profits, you're going to go for a better car or a bigger car. Another reason or another benefit of business is that it enhances your personal incomes. You as an owner will have more money to spend if your business is profitable, and if you have stockholders or stakeholders similarly, they're going to benefit from the business as well, because they will earn more money, they will have a better life, they're going to have better opportunities in front of them. Another benefit of business is that you as an individual become a taxpayer, because all businesses would need to pay taxes to the government, so you become a taxpayer as well. And finally, there's this thing, inner self satisfaction as well, whereby when you have money, you're giving more to charities and you're giving more to your community, whereby your community is flourishing as well. So when you go around seeing parks and various things, mosques maybe, you would say, okay, my business is the one which gave money for this particular project. So you have that inner satisfaction as well, that you're doing something more for the community that you're living in, for the country that you're living in, and you're generally doing things for the general well-being of the people that are living in your country. Now, as I told you earlier in the beginning as well, that it's very important to talk about how business has evolved during the years. It's very important to think what were the reasons or what were the situations that businessmen, entrepreneurs went through to become what they are today. Now there are various phases, there are various eras, there are various time frames that we will talk about. Now basically we're going to talk about evolution of business. Now the very first thing that we will talk about is the factory system and the Industrial Revolution. I'm talking mid of 18th century here. Now Industrial Revolution, what it did was it basically changed manufacturing, meaning before the Industrial Revolution, what used to happen is that individuals like you and me would be specialized in whatever we used to do. For example, if I'm a carpenter and I make chairs, I would make the whole of the chair, meaning I would make the legs, I would make the handles, I would make the cushion for the chair, and I would also put cloth on the cushion, or maybe make cushions for the chair as well. In short, I would be making the complete chair myself. Nobody else will be involved. Nobody is going to help me out. This was before the Industrial Revolution. What happened with the Industrial Revolution is that a factory system the concept of a factory system was born. Now, what was a concept? What's a factory system? A factory system is a particular place, a physical place actually, a big hall type of a place, whereby you bring in together material, you bring the material in that place, you bring in the worker in that place, and you also bring in raw material in that place. Meaning that the workers now would not be working individually at their homes, they would all be coming to a factory. And the factory is going to be one place which is going to provide them raw material, it's going to provide them machinery, and it's going to provide all the workers a particular place whereby they can sit, stand, whatever, and make the products that they're supposed to make. Another characteristic of the Industrial Revolution was that it made the cost of raw material, it reduced the cost of raw material. Now, how did that happen? It happened basically by the fact that before the Industrial Revolution, if I was just one person making an entire chair, how many chairs will I make in a month? Let's say I would just make, let's say, 5 chairs, 10 chairs maybe, that's about it. But now in a factory system, when we had 10, 15 different people coming together, working together, that factory was now producing 1500 chairs. Now what does that mean for raw material? It means that जब मैं अकेले काम कर रही थी, so what I was doing was that I was just producing as much as I could. But now when a lot of other people are working with me in the factory, I'm producing much more. Now if I'm producing much more, obviously I'll be needing more raw material. Now when I will be needing more raw material, I would be buying it in bulk. Now it's a very common phenomenon. Just put Industrial Revolution on the side and just think about it when you go to a grocery shop or when you go to a wholesaler dealer, right? A wholesaler shop. What happens? If you just buy 1 packet of surf, it's going to cost you this much. But if you say, okay, I'm going to buy 15 or 20 packets of surf, what will happen? The shopkeeper or the wholesaler is going to give those 20 packets of surf on a reduced price. The same thing happened in this Industrial Revolution as well. When they started buying raw material in bulk, the cost of that raw material came down. That is why in the Industrial Revolution there was low cost raw material, or the cost of raw material was considerably reduced. Another thing that was there in the Industrial Revolution or the factory system was specialization of labor. Specialization of labor means that one worker is not going to produce one wholesome piece of furniture. meaning that I, as an individual carpenter, will not produce a complete chair. What will happen is, I'll go in a factory, I as a person will only be responsible for making the legs of the chair. Somebody else will be responsible for making the handles of the chair. Somebody else will be responsible for making the back of the chair. Then there will be another person who will be responsible for making the cushion of the chair. Then there will be another person who will be responsible for putting cloth on that cushion. That is called a specialization of labor, whereby you break down the larger work into smaller pieces of work, and then that small piece is given to a particular individual, and that particular individual does that work day in and day out every day and becomes specialized in that, or become a specialist in that particular work. So in short, what Industrial Revolution did, it started producing products in large quantities, in large numbers, or something as we call as mass production. Now, what mass production did was, it replaced a skilled worker with a semi-skilled worker who was trained to perform a single task, aided by a specialized equipment. And as I said earlier as well, because of this particular fact that more people were doing, everyone was doing a single work, single job, and as a result of which a lot of equipment, there was an increased output. That is the last thing, that during the Industrial Revolution there was an increased output. Now, Industrial Revolution and factory system was replaced by the laissez-faire and the entrepreneurial era. That is somewhere during the 19th century. Now, what happened during the 19th century was that businesses thought that we are businessmen and this is our business, and the government as an entity should not interfere with our business. That means that businesses should be run without rules, excessive rules and regulations by the government. The business by itself will take care of the demand and supply, and the demand and supply will be the regulatory feature in the business, meaning the demand and supply will regulate the business. We do not need government intervention. We do not need the government to interfere with its own rules and regulations. In this particular era, what happened was that the common themes or the common words that were used were entrepreneurship and risk. Everybody who wanted to take risk, who wanted to earn profit, who wanted to make money, would become an entrepreneur, would have or would start their own corporation or their own business or their own enterprise or their own thing and become a businessman. Now, that's the good side of the entrepreneurial era. The bad side or the downside of it is that these big corporations were making it difficult for competition to enter. Do you know what competition is? Competition is when a lot of companies are producing similar or same kind of products and bringing it into the market. Now, what happens with competition is that you and I as a consumer or customers, we have a choice. So if this company is producing something and this company is producing the same thing, we will have a choice, okay, which company's product to buy from. Should it be A or should it be B? Now, our choice will depend upon one, price, and two, quality, and we're going to choose the best quality product which is going to be available at the least, which is going to be least expensive. That is what competition does. It sort of ensures that the price levels remain at a level whereby the consumers can afford it, and it also ensures that good quality products come into the market. Now, what was happening in the entrepreneurial era is that these large companies that we just discussed were making it difficult for competition to survive, because you need to see that if there are large companies in the market and there are already established companies in the market, they can make life of a new competitor or a new organization coming into the business very, very hard. Again, these were the corporations, or the big corporations were the one which were controlling the entire market. Now, when this started to happen, then what the customers were at the losing end. They were not given choices. The price levels would be very, very high. Maybe the quality of products would be very, very low. And in result of all these negative points, the society generally demanded greater accountability. They said that, no, we're not going to take this. This is not fair to us. We as customers need good quality products at reasonable prices. And they said, okay, this is how it should happen. And that resulted in a lot of rules and regulations with reference to accountability, with reference to what customer needs and what customer wants, and primarily with reference to customer rights. And the basic customer right is to get goods and services, good goods and services, good quality goods and services at a good price or at a reasonable price. Now, after the entrepreneurial era, we have the production era. That is somewhere early 20th, I'm talking early 20th century. This was the era which resulted in increased productivity, which resulted in increased output, primarily because of scientifically studying jobs and defining one best way to perform. Meaning that in this particular era, what people, or more importantly scientists, did was that they said that a job is, you can do a job scientifically, meaning that they said that you need to study individual jobs, and then you need to see and you need to study them scientifically. Now, what does that mean and what does that entail? For example, I have to pick this ballpoint up from here, right? Now, picking it up from here till and moving it till here, if I see it scientifically, it's going to involve various motions of my hand. Now, whenever they started studying job scientifically, what they did was that they started seeing that, okay, if my job involved picking up a pen, they would see that how many motions are there in picking of this pen up, and then they would see that are all these motions necessary or not, and if they were necessary, and if they were not necessary, they would remove those motions. And in the end, my simple motion of picking this pen or this ballpoint up would become a scientific motion, whereby my energies and my efforts would not be wasted. Now, this particular method of analyzing every job, analyzing every task to see that what was that one best way of performing it, was basically dubbed or called as scientific management. And it was during this era, during this production era, during the scientific management, that we came up with the concept of an assembly line. Now, if you're aware, or if you've watched television and you watch Nat Geo, or if you watch National Geographic and you see those big car makers documentaries whereby they show factories which make cars, you would see that every person is standing where they are, and there's a conveyor belt which moves in front of them, and that conveyor belt is one which carries the frame of the car. And as the frame of the car moves, there are people who put in the tires, there are people who put in the steering wheel, there are people who put in the windows or the windshield, there are people who tighten the bolts, tighten the nuts, and the conveyor belt moves the frame of the car forward, and at the end of that particular period, there's a whole wholesome car that you have. Now, that conveyor belt I'm talking about is basically the assembly line. Now, the concept or the basic characteristics of an assembly line are that they are fixed workstations, meaning that the workstations are going to remain where they are. And when I say fixed workstation, that means that the work comes to the worker, and it is not the other way around, whereby the worker goes to the work. Coming again, if you get confused, if you're getting confused here. In an assembly line, you have fixed workstations, meaning that if this is my workstation, I'm going to stay here and not move. The work itself is going to come to me. I'm going to do whatever I need to do where I'm standing or sitting. And once I'm done, the work will move forward to another worker. The second characteristic of an assembly line is that it resulted in increased task specialization. If I was supposed to tighten a nut or a bolt in a car, that is the only task that I will do day in, day out for the entire remaining period of my job or work that I'm doing. So I would become increasingly specialized in that. I would not be able to do anything else. If tomorrow they would shift me somewhere, I would be unable to perform that job because I'm extremely specialized in just tightening the bolt and the nut of whatever I'm doing. Finally, it applied the concept of scientific management, whereby they scrutinized and they saw every action of the worker in great depth, in great detail, and they said and they saw and they analyzed and they basically came up with the conclusion that what is the best way of tightening a bolt. If it is this, then it would be just this, right? And every person who's tightening the bolt will have to do it like this. So that is the primarily that is what happened in the production era. Now let's come to the downside of this particular era. What happened was that when workers became increasingly specialized, there was no worker freedom, meaning that if I'm just supposed to do this, just think, I'm just supposed to do this day in, day out, 365 days of the year, it's going to become boring, right? It's going to become monotonous, right? I will get tired of doing it at some point, and I'm going to say, yaar, main kya kar raha hu? Main kya kar rahi hu? This is the only thing that I'm doing. As a result of which, the worker freedom went somewhere. The workers were not free enough to do what they wanted to do. And when that happened, it basically meant that the workers were now demotivated. They would not be involved in their job. They would not do things happily. Now when that started happening, when workers were demotivated and workers were unhappy, that's when there was a rise in labor unions. Labor unions is a group of people who fight for the rights of these workers. So basically the production era was all about the scientific management. It was about the use and the success of the assembly line, and it was about the workers not having the freedom, and it was about the increase or the rise of labor unions in organizations and business. The next era that we're going to talk about is the marketing era. This is after World War II. This is the year after World War II. Now, before the marketing era, businesses were basically production and sales oriented. For example, in the production era, Henry Ford is the one that we're talking about. He used to produce cars, and he used to say that people can have any color car that they want as long as it is black. Meaning, in short, that I'm just producing black cars. If you want a car, you can have it in black. You will not have any other color choices because I'm the one who's producing it and I'm the one who's going to produce it in black. However, this particular concept changed in the marketing era. Now, it was when that businesses decided that customers are important, one, and two, that customers have certain needs and wants, and it is a responsibility of the organization, and it is a responsibility of the enterprise to first identify those needs and wants, and then make products and make goods and make services that would fulfill those needs and wants, meaning that they are going to, the organizations are going to make goods and services which would best suit the needs of the customer. So if a customer wanted a yellow car, the customer will get a yellow car. If everybody said that we want a neon green car, then the companies would produce a neon green car, irrespective कि companies को पसंद है या नहीं है. They're going to say, okay, the customers need it, the customer wants it, the customer likes it, we're going to produce it. So that is what the marketing era was about. The marketing era was all about producing things, making goods and services which would fulfill the needs and wants of the customers, and you need to make the customers happy. Produce everything and anything that they want. Now, keeping in mind that the things that the companies would produce would be for profit making. The next era after the marketing era is the global era. This is the 90s, 80s that I'm talking about, which is characterized by technological advances, more technology, more use of technology, computer technology, communication capabilities, whereby internet or email was something whereby you could now communicate with people living very far off in a matter of seconds. Another characterization of the global era is the global economy. Now, or taking advantages of other countries' resources. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, if you would just look around yourself and maybe look at the clothes that you have, and if you would look at the tags at the back of the neck, and if you would see the tag, what you're going to see is most of those clothes will be made in China, or they would be made in Vietnam, or they would be made in Bangladesh. However, the company producing it might be an American company, or the company producing it might be based in Pakistan, or the company producing it might be based in England. Now, what is happening is, or let me give you another example as well. For example, if you go to US today, and you would obviously go for shopping as well. Now, any product or most of the products that you will pick from the shelf in United States will not be made in United States. It's going to be made in China, Vietnam, India, or Bangladesh. Now what these US companies are doing is they're taking advantages of another country's resources. For example, China, or for example, India. Do you know how many people live there? They're the most populous countries in the world, and as a result of which labor or human resource is inexpensive there. Now when these international brands would go to these countries, they would get human resource or labor at very inexpensive rates, as a result of which the cost of making their products is going to be less. When they bring it back to their own country to sell it at a particular price, the sales margin is going to be more, as a result of which there is going to be more profit. That is what the global era is all about, whereby the economy in itself has become global. We're not restricted to a particular boundary. We're not restricted to a particular place. We can go anywhere we like. Living in Pakistan, I can produce in China. I can get my goods and services from Bangladesh and come back and sell it in Pakistan. That is what the global era is all about. And finally, we have the information era. Now that's the use of internet. For example, if you have people or relatives or friends living in abroad, now you're using Skype. What is Skype? Now before that, or many years before that, if somebody went to America, that meant that somebody really went, because calling would be very, very expensive. Writing a letter would mean कि आपके 2-3 हफ्ते चले गए कि आपका लेटर वहाँ पहुँचेगा, फिर वो बंदा पढ़ेगा, फिर आपको जवाब लिखेगा, फिर 2-3 हफ्ते लगेंगे. About 1 month, 1.5 months went, और आपको खैर खबर नहीं मिलती. Now you just open your laptop up, you connect to the internet, you click the Skype button, you have another friend or a relative or sister or a mother sitting in UK, and you talk to her, you can see her face, you can interact with that person. That is what internet has done. Now it is not just about interaction of relatives, it is also about interaction of producers, manufacturers, and suppliers. So if I have a business in Pakistan and I want to place an order in China, I can do that very easily through internet. Now because of the information era, what has happened is that this information era has given a level playing field to every company, be it big, be it small. Every company has the same set of rules, have the same game rules for success. So if it's a small company, it can do very well. Maybe if there's a company which just takes orders from the internet and produces things and send it, it can be as successful as big companies who have larger presences, who have bigger offices, who have bigger, more manpower, who have more human resources. So the information era has given a level playing field to everybody, be it a small company or be it a big company. Now we're going to move further. We've just explained to you what businesses are. We've just explained to you the history of how businesses have evolved during the years. Now businesses do not exist in a vacuum. There's a particular environment around the business in which they exist, right? Now before we talk about these environment, one of those environment is an economic environment as well. And before we go into that, we need to study economic systems. Now what is an economic system, or how do you define an economic system? It's basically a nation's way of allocating resources among its citizens, both individuals and organizations. So an economic system is basically ways and means by which countries or nations allocate resources to various organizations or various individuals which are existing or living in that particular country. Now when I say resources, what do I mean? Resources is simply your factor of production. Now what are factor of production? There are basically 5 different types of factor of production. First up is labor. Labor is basically human resource that you have. It could be the physical as an individual human resource or a person that I'm talking about, or it could be intellectual intellectual use of human resource as well. The second factor of production is capital, which is the financial resources, or in short, money. The third factor of production is entrepreneur, or the person or the individual who is assuming risk or is taking risk to start a business. The fourth factor of production are resources, natural resources, raw materials which are required to make your product, which are required to make your goods and services. And finally, you have information resources, data and information about various things like what does your consumer want, what does your customer want, market forecast, forecast about the economy. Now, if you would open books, various books, if they're older versions or older editions, you will just have these four factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. This information resources is a latest addition to the factor of production. And why is it important today? It's one of the most important resource, because if you do not have the right kind of information, you will never be able to succeed in doing your business. Now, when I explained to you or defined to you the term of economic system, I said it's ways and means through which nations control, distribute, or make decisions about the resources. This word resources is synonymous with factor of production. So again, I'm going to define an economic system for you. An economic system is basically ways and means through which nations decide, first up, who controls the factor of production. Two, the second decisions that these nations takes is how do we distribute these factor of production. Now, based on these two decisions that nations take, we have two different types of economies. We have the planned economy, and then we have the market economy. Let's go planned economy first. Now, planned economy is an economy where government is the one which makes all decisions regarding production of factor of production and distribution of factor of production. Meaning, the government is the one who is going to decide what to produce and how much to produce and who to distribute it to. Now, why do you think governments do that? Governments do that simply because they think individuals like you and me are selfish in nature, and since we are selfish, we will only think about ourselves. The government doesn't want that, so it takes that right away from us and says, no, you will not decide about anything, it's only us who's going to decide about everything. So कंट्री में क्या प्रोड्यूस होगा, गवर्नमेंट डिसाइड करेगी. कितना प्रोड्यूस होगा, क्वांटिटी गवर्नमेंट डिसाइड करेगी. किसको कितना मिलेगा, गवर्नमेंट डिसाइड करेगी. To give you an example of planned economy in today's time, Cuba is one example whereby we have planned economies or controlled economies, as they call it. Again, North Korea is an example whereby they have planned economy or controlled economy. The good side maybe of planned economy is that everybody is treated equally. So there's no rich and there's no poor. The government is the one deciding kisko kitna milna hai, and as a result of which it ensures that everybody residing in that country will remain at the same level. On the other hand, the downside of this particular system, economic system, is that there's demotivation, meaning there are two people, A and B, right? A works 12 hours a day and B works 2 hours a day. However, जब तनख्वाह मिलने की बारी आती है या खाना मिलने की बारी आती है, both of them are being treated equally. This person is going to get the same amount of money as compared to this person, and this person is going to get the same amount of food as compared to this person. Now, eventually what will happen is that this person will ask कि मैं इतना काम क्यों कर रहा हूँ? When there is no differentiation, मैं इतना काम कर भी मुझे इतना मिल रहा है और मेरा दोस्त बिल्कुल काम नहीं कर रहा, उसको भी इतना मिल रहा है, तो what's the point? What will happen is that this person will also stop working और फिर कोई भी काम नहीं करता है. That's one of the biggest downside of planned economies. On the other hand, on the total opposite of that, there's something called as market economy. Now, before we define what market economy is, you need to know what a market is. A market is basically a mechanism of exchange between buyers and sellers of a goods and service. I defined a market is basically how buyers and sellers, it's a place where buyers and sellers interact for exchange of goods and services. Coming back to a definition of market economy, which is a total opposite of planned economy. A market economy is whereby organizations and businesses control, individuals control businesses, and the role of government is negligible, or it does not exist, meaning that the government does not regulate business. It is producers and consumers who control the factor of production, and the government has no say in that. Now, how does that work? फिर तो जो buyer होगा, he would want, or a buyer would want the highest price, that the buyer would want the lowest price, and the seller would want the highest price. But matching, how would transaction take place? How would exchange take place? How would a business grow, or businesses आगे कैसे चलेंगे? What happens in the market economy is that there are two sellers, right? Now both of them are selling apples. Now this seller is selling apples for, let's say, 70 rupees a kg, and this seller is selling apples for 150 rupees a kg. Now, as a consumer myself, if I'm the consumer or the customer, I'm first going to go to this person who's selling apples for 70 rupees a kg, and I'm going to say, okay, how much are you selling it for? He's going to tell me 70 rupees a kg. अच्छा ठीक है, मैं quality देखूंगी कैसे हैं कैसे नहीं है, and I'm going to see कि do I want to buy them or not. Then I'm going to go to the other vendor and ask him how much is he selling the apples for, and he's going to say I'm selling it for 120 rupees a kg, and I'm going to say no, it's too high for me. However, I'm also going to check the quality of that particular vendor. Now, if the quality of both the vendors are equal, what I'm going to do as a consumer is I'm going to come back to the first vendor and buy apples for 70 rupees a kg, right? Now, that will send a signal to the other vendor that the price that vendor is charging, 120 that is very, very high, and automatically that vendor will start reducing prices and bring it to a level whereby I as a customer would be interested in buying that particular apples from that particular vendor. That's how, through the forces of demand and supply, a market economy is regulated. Now, I just told you what planned economies are, and I just told you what market economies are. Now, when we're talking planned economy, there are two versions of it: communism and socialism. Now, communism is a type of planned economy whereby there is no private enterprise. Individuals cannot do private business. Everything will be controlled by the government, be it transport, be it hospitals, be it production of vegetables, be it production of food, be it anything in that country. Everything will be controlled by the government, and there will be no private property or private businesses in that particular economy, meaning the government owns and operates all factors of production, and it is the government which will assign people to jobs and own all businesses and control businesses' decisions as well. That is what communism is. A slightly softer version of planned economy is what socialism is. Socialism is again whereby the government is going to control all major industries, and the government is going to control all major businesses. However, there is a concept of private businesses in a socialist country. However, these private businesses are heavily taxed. Now, why are they heavily taxed? They're heavily taxed so that the government thinks that if you tax these businesses heavily, you're going to keep them in check. They're not going to become richer, they're not going to become more profitable, as a result of which the owners of those businesses will not become very rich and will not become very different from all other people who are living in that particular country. So in a socialism, in a country which has socialism in it, what happens is, yes, the government controls all major businesses. However, individuals or companies or people are allowed to have private businesses, like maybe open up a restaurant. And if somebody opens up a restaurant, that is going to be a private business, but the government is going to heavily tax it, so that those businesses are kept in check, and the government takes away a lot of the money that they earn and invests it and puts it to good use, for use of in the general welfare of the people. So that is what communism is. Now, if we're talking market economy, another name for market economy is capitalism. Capitalism is whereby the government supports private ownership and encourages entrepreneurship. It is individuals who choose where to work, what to buy and how much to pay for, and producers choose who to hire, what to produce and how much to charge. We've just explained this to you earlier as well. Now you can ask me this question that could I give you an example of a planned economy or a market economy or a capitalist economy? I just gave an example for planned economy, but if you just ask me this question again, or if you would ask me to give you an example again, I would say that there's no pure planned economy or a pure market economy that exists today. If it is, you need to see it in the way of a spectrum. You have planned economy here, and you have market economy here, and you have all those countries somewhere in the middle. So you can have a country which is more inclined towards market economy or capitalism, some country like US, or you can have countries which will be more inclined towards planned economies, communism, some countries like North Korea or Cuba. Now, there's a third kind of economic system as well, which is basically a combination of your planned economy and your market economy, which is called as a mixed market economy, which features characteristics of both planned economy and market economy. And if you ask me where Pakistan is, we have an economic system which is called as mixed market economy. So we as Pakistanis, or the economic system being used in Pakistan, is called as a mixed market economy. Now, one of the characteristics of a mixed market economy is privatization as well. What is privatization? Which is basically converting government enterprises into privately owned enterprise. So it's basically converting an organization which was owned by government, selling its shares to private sector, and now or then onwards the enterprise or the organization is privately owned. For example, Pakistan Telecommunication, PTCL, it was government owned before, but it has been privatized, and now it is not owned by government, it is owned by a company which is in the private sector. Now, what you would see in the slide is that socialism comes under mixed market economy, although I have told you that socialism is a type of planned economy. What the book says is, they've mentioned socialism under mixed market economy is because socialism involves a little bit of private enterprise. As I told you when I was explaining socialism to you, I told you explicitly that socialism is major important industries are controlled by the government, but a small part or private businesses in a very small way exist in a socialist or in the economic system which we call as socialism. That's why you have socialism mentioned under the mixed market economy. However, if you would open other books, or if you would open your reference book that I've mentioned, socialism is a part of planned economy, or planned economy can be divided into two categories. It could either be communism or it could be socialism. And then we have market economies, which are, in other words, we can also call them capitalist economies or capitalism. Now, once we're talking economic system, or once we're talking market economy, I told you that in a market economy, the forces of demand and supply play a very, very important role. Now, what is demand and what is supply? Demand is basically the willingness and the ability of buyers to purchase a particular product. Now, there are two very important words in this definition. First up is willingness, and the second up is ability. Willingness is, do I want it or not? Ability is, do I have the money for it or not? For example, if I don't want this pen, if I don't need this pen, irrespective if I have money in my pocket, I will not buy it, and I will not create demand for it. So it is very, very important for demand that a buyer needs to have willingness. When I say willingness, meaning the buyer should want to buy that particular product. And second thing is that the buyer should have the money or the financial resources to purchase that particular product or good or service. Second thing is supply. Supply is the willingness and the ability of producers to offer a good or a service for sale. It's basically manufacturers, when I say supply, basically when manufacturers are willing and they have the ability to produce products and then bring it to the market so that the buyers can purchase it, that is what supply is. Now, when we talk of demand and supply, we need to talk of the law of demand and the law of supply as well. Now, the law of demand says that buyers will purchase more of a product as its price drops and less of a product as its price increases, meaning that the price of a product and the demand of a product are inversely proportional. इसका मतलब that जिस तरीके से प्राइस ऊपर जाती है उसी तरीके से डिमांड नीचे आएगी. जिस तरीके से प्राइस नीचे आना शुरू हो जाएगी, ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोग उस पर्टिकुलर प्रोडक्ट को खरीदना शुरू हो जाएंगे. That is what we call as law of demand. The other type is called as law of supply, which is basically producers will offer more of a product for sale if its price rises, and less of a product as its price drops. That means that in case from the perspective of the suppliers, or from the perspective of supply, the supply law says that as the prices goes up, the supply will go up, and as the prices will come down, the supply will come down as well, meaning that the supply of a particular product and the demand of a particular product are directly proportional to each other. I think we're going to end today's lecture here, and we're going to quickly recap the things that we've done so far. In this very first chapter of Introduction to Business, what we've done is we've basically defined what business is. We've explained in detail that business would involve an exchange activity or transaction. We've defined what buyers and sellers are. We should by now know what goods and services are. We have very clearly defined what profit is. In addition to defining a particular business, we've gone through the history of how businesses have evolved during these past many years. Then we've talked about various economic systems in which businesses operate. We've talked about planned economies, communism and socialism. We've talked about market economies, which is also known as capitalism, and we've talked about mixed market economies or mixed economies, the type that we have in Pakistan. And then finally, we are ending our lecture with definition of demand and supply, which I've just explained to you, and a little bit of elaboration on law of demand and law of supply. And the next time that we meet, we're going to talk about equilibrium price. We're going to talk about how to determine a particular price at which the customers are willing to pay, willing to buy, and the suppliers are willing to supply a particular product. And we're going to end chapter 1 with our discussion on what private enterprise systems are, or what private enterprises are, and what are the different types of competition that we have that exist in a particular marketplace. Thank you.